Do you like using pattern paper but don't like the pile of scraps left over? Hi, I'm Jess from JessCrafts.com and I'm here to help you make the most of your crafty supplies and time. So let's get making. Today I have a 6x6 paper busting template for A2 cards. This is template number 45, which means that there are 44 other templates for 6x6 paper and A2 size cards over at JessCrafts.com. But beyond that, there are templates for 6x8 paper, 12x12 paper, and some other paper sizes for A2 cards, but also templates for Slimline and 5x7 cards and all kinds of different things. So many templates for you to check out. This one tells you how to cut the paper to make 4 cards, which is a lot. I usually try to make it not as many, but this was inspired by a particular sketch. Today I'm going to use some basic gray Sweet Threads paper. This is super old. I bought it at a thrift store, so somebody destashed it. And if you are into the idea of crafty thrift stores, I actually have a page on Jess Crafts, a blog post on JessCrafts.com, where I list a bunch of crafty thrift stores you can find throughout the US, and so I will link that, and I actually found 2 online stores as well. And I'm just going to pick one paper for this. I'm trying to decide which one I like the best. What I like about this design is I think it actually works really well without mixing patterns. So a lot of times I will cut 2 pieces of paper and mix the patterns or use double-sided paper, but I'm actually using single-sided paper today. In part because people ask me often, for ideas for single-sided paper. And I do believe almost all of my sketches will work with single-sided paper. It's just that you might prefer to see some more interest by adding 2 different patterns. But they all are meant to cut one sheet of paper, so they all can be used with single-sided. So I first started by cutting them into 2x6" strips, which represents each of these. And all these measurements are on the sketch, so you don't have to worry about that, and there's a link in the video description to download it. Then it says to cut them to 1 inch. So I have 1 inch by 2 inch. So I'm just bringing this along and going from 6 to 5 to 4 to 3. And I need 4 of these for each of my cards today. Now, a challenge of my paper trimmer, I like the Guillotine paper trimmer because it's really excellent when you are trying to cut a lot of things, but it doesn't do so well when you're trying to cut really small things, i.e. these 1/2 inch pieces that are needed here. I do have a second paper trimmer, and that can be a great way to get around it, a traditional paper trimmer. I don't like it as much because then you need to replace the blades, but I can put a 1/2 inch down a lot easier and cut that. However, with your Guillotine paper trimmer, you still can cut a 1/2 inch. There's a couple of different things you can do. You can add a little bit of extra paper to hold on to by putting like a sticky note there, kind of extend your paper with a piece of sticky note, or you can just trim it up with your scissors instead and measure it out. You don't need to have a second trimmer on hand. These pieces though, I might actually just use the back side of them. I haven't decided yet, which would be unexpected in the sense of I would just be using a chunk of white paper, but I think that's something we sometimes forget, is that the backside of single-sided is just white. So in this case, where it's just coming to a sentiment area, if I need just a little bit of white paper, there's no reason I can't use the backside of a pattern paper that I don't have any interest in using for any particular reason. This sketch, because it has so many little pieces, is great for using up scraps. Having lots of little pieces also does, take a little bit more time and work, of course, to cut all the mats, just because you should cut more things, but it is nice to sometimes have an idea for when you have all those tiny scraps of a particular color. So for each paper, I'm going to need to cut a mat that is a 1/4 inch bigger. If you don't like a 1/4 inch mat, that's totally fine. You can remeasure them to an 1/8 inch mat, but the template does give you the measurements for a 1/4 inch, and you can also just skip the mat completely. And this sketch in particular, I think, would look fine without its mat. It's just more of your personal preference. And so I'll make those small mats there, and they are 2 1/4 by 3/4. And then I also need some mats that are 1 1/4 by 2 1/4. So I'm going to see if I have any good scrap pieces that are kind of already really close to that, and then cut from there. But I'm going to try to use up these scraps. Now, when I do use up scraps like this, I wind up creating even smaller scraps. Once they get to about 1/2 inch wide, I just tape these together and start using them for fake foam tape or propping things up under cards when my scraps get really, really small. And then eventually I do just toss them. So if I just have my, my fake foam tape bin is overflowing, I just let go of cardstock. I have all of my pieces here with some adhesive on the back, and then I can just start assembling all the pieces. I'm only going to make 1 card on screen today to save time in the video, but of course it does make 4 cards in all, and I tend to make all 4 cards of a pretty similar design. I do donate a lot of my cards, so it's fine to have 4 of the exact same, but it's also, if you're someone who you don't want to donate all of your cards, but you do like using the no scrap templates, but you don't want to give the same of each one. What I suggest is making 1 card for that occasion you have coming up, like, your friend's birthday or something, and then make 3 more cards that are very similar, but donate those 3 extra cards. And you can go to jesscrafts.com to find a list of organizations you can donate cards to based on, theme and the recipient, like who they send their cards to. So you can think, oh, I have a lot of kids cards. Do I have an organization that, needs cards for kids? What I do like is scrapbook.com's Cards for Kindness. They redistribute the cards to a couple of different organizations. So if you just have like a large mix of cards that would go great for any age, occasion, etc., they can be a great place to donate your cards to. I'm going to use the lines on my grid mat to help me to place these elements across the card, referencing my sketch here. I like to place the 2 outer ones because then I think it's a little bit easier to eyeball where the next 2 go in terms of even spacing. I don't measure that kind of thing out, and I just place it down gently, although that was apparently not as gentle as I thought, so that I can shift it over as needed. I did decide to put the pattern side up just because when I was looking at this particular pattern, I thought I could place a small sentiment right there and it will still be pretty readable, so I'll take advantage of the pretty pattern paper. For my embellishment today, I am going to use a stamp set from Ink Blot Shop. I think their stamps are really cute and whimsical. They're also very simple, so they're easy to color if you're not someone who likes to do a lot of coloring. She has a lot of stamps that you can color easily, like this particular stamp set, but it still represents people, which is kind of nice. I like to make sure that I'm representing all kinds of people, and you can see here in this stamp set, there's like lots of different hairstyles, even though the girls are very simple, so you can make them look like a lot of different people with those different hairstyle options. And I like to make sure I'm representing a wide range of people in my coloring, because like I said, I would donate my cards, so they're going to all kinds of different people, and I think sometimes we just start coloring people to look the way that we look because that's what we know, or it's what we feel more confident in. But I challenge you to try to, do something a little bit different, get outside your comfort zone, and try some different skin tones. I do have some videos where I go a little bit more in depth about how I color skin tones or how I color different hairstyles. When I am coloring many images like this, like I need 4 images because I have 4 cards, I will typically color them all the same, and that is mostly to save me time. I only have to pick out 1 set of markers or whatever, when I pick my colors for whatever color medium. I'm using Copics. I think you're going to get very good results with many different coloring mediums. Again, when you have a simpler image like this, I actually think that it's easier to work with markers that you maybe don't know as much about or blend as well, because all the images or the shapes are really, really simple. So I think these are really great practice images. The lines on them are not the thickest out there. I do always, people ask sometimes, like, what would you recommend for a beginner for Copic markers? And I almost always say Lawn Fawn, because the lines are really simple, and the like in terms of there not being lots of little detail to color in, but also the physical stamp lines are a little bit thicker. So if you have a little bit of issue with bleeding, you don't have to be as careful or necessarily using as nice of paper to get the same results, because you can have a little bit of allowance for that bleeding. And also just trying to be careful not to put too much pressure on a marker. I find that as soon as my marker touches the paper, it starts to release some ink. And so I don't need to necessarily, apply that much pressure, because then more and more ink sinks into the paper, and then it's more likely to bleed out of the lines or to create larger or more splotchy areas than I intended. A really gentle hand helps quite a bit. Stamp my sentiment in some dark green ink to kind of pull in the color of her dress and more of the green from the card, since I picked the pink for the mats, because I felt like when I looked at that paper, the two main colors I saw were green and pink. It's really easy for that stuff to look kind of Christmassy, even though it's pink instead of red. So I think that sometimes that's a tricky color scheme to work with. And then it was a little bit, I'm like, where do I place the little girl? I did cut her out with a bit of a white border, even though I fussy cut her, partly because I wouldn't want to fussy cut directly on those stick arms. So I think the white border helps a lot there. And I thought, okay, I put her on this side of the card to kind of balance this out, but I really like when the thing that I want you to look at most directly interacts with also something like the sentiment, and draws your attention. However, then she's kind of a little smack dab in the center of the card, which isn't looking great. And I'm hoping just talking out this explanation is helpful for those who struggle with, again, where do I place this? Because my sketch gives you this. But when you want to add anything on top of it, there's not really any suggestions in the sketch for that. It doesn't say put your focal point here. So the other thing I was thinking I could do is put her on this side and just make the card really heavy towards this side. I don't know, I might experiment, because I do have 4 cards, and kind of see which one I like the best. But I do like how this really highlights her too, because she's in one of the boxes. It makes me think this could also be a card where if you had plenty of time to color, you could even put like one of these little girls in each of the boxes, and that would look really cute as well. If you found this video helpful, here's another video where you can find more ideas for enjoying your crafty time and supplies. Let me know you like this video with a share to your crafty community, subscribe and click the bell so you don't miss the next template or tutorial, and check the video description for product links. See you in the next video.